What's up, guys? Welcome to the latest episode of Rabbit Hole. I'm your perfect and humble leader, Chris Valenti, and today we're going to be diving into the rabbit hole of the Pope, the Vatican, and the Catholic Church, specifically this dynamic shift between the Vatican during World War II and the Vatican now. As you know, you probably do know this, the Catholic Church and the Vatican had like a neutrality agreement with the Nazis and the Italians during World War II, and have even been accused of, harboring a bunch of Nazis and proven to have helped get a bunch of them out of Europe after World War II. And then now, with the recent passing of Pope Francis, he's being highlighted for his humanitarian aid efforts and his, he made daily calls to the Catholic Church of Gaza, and he, really did push this idea of unity rather than like Christian authoritarianism, which is something that we've seen throughout history among the Catholic Church and specifically the Vatican. So we're going to be doing a quick deep dive into the history. So if you're here for the history, don't forget we do sell some Valenti Videos merch. This is the Stick to History Bro mug, and you could find that down below. You could also get the 40% off discount to the Ground News Vantage subscription, which is what I use to help parse through all the bullshit in modern politics. Other than that, you can become a patron on Patreon, and you can become a member here on YouTube, both for $5. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. It costs you nothing, and it helps me immensely. Now, let's dive into this rabbit hole, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to focus on the Vatican in the period leading up to World War II, right? And you really do have to take a huge focus on Pope Pius XII, okay? Pope Pius XII, born Eugenio Maria Giuseppe Giovanni Pacelli. What a fucking name. He was born 1876, and he lived until 1958. But he was the head of the Catholic Church and sovereign of Vatican City State from March 2nd, 1939, until his death on October 1958. Now, you're probably noticing, hold on, 1939 is also the year where, World War II really started to kick off. The Nazis invade Poland, like shit really starts to kick off. That seems like a very inconvenient time to become the Pope. And it is, right? So we're going to cover the history of this guy and also compare him to the history of our boy Pope Francis, right? Who just died the day after Easter, a couple of days ago. And just an incredible Pope. And just to remind you guys, I was raised Catholic, and then we became like Episcopalian for a while. I am not Christian, I'm not Catholic, but I do study history enough, and I studied theology in college, and I was Christian long enough to understand the importance of a humanitarian pope, somebody who's like woke, the woke pope. Anyway, let's dive right into this, guys. So the first thing that we're going to have to talk about here, let me get rid of Pope Pius here, is the Reich Concordat. The Reich Concordat, right? So the Reich Concordat was a agreement, a treaty between the Holy See, who are representatives of the Vatican, and the German Reich, right? So this is at the rise of Nazism, right? It's an agreement between the Vatican and the emergent Nazi Germany, signed in July of 1933, signed by Eugenio Pacelli, who then became Pope Pius XII. That's why I focus so hard on his name, right? So this agreement, the Reich Concordat, is essentially an agreement with the Germans, right? Which is that the Vatican and the Catholic Church will not, interfere with Nazi ideology as long as the Nazis do not interfere with Catholicism in Germany, right? And this is important to note because this agreement that the Vatican thought would be protecting the Catholic people, it was immediately violated by the Germans, right? And yet, even still, the Vatican, the Pope, they did not condemn the Germans until fucking years later, right? So this agreement, it ends up moving into it has a big part of this, right? A very important part to understand this is that Pope Pius XII, right? He was a papal nuncio in Germany since like 1917. Now, a papal nuncio is a permanent diplomatic representative of the Holy See, right? Which is what we just covered earlier, the central governing body of the Catholic Church, right? So I scrolled down here a little bit so that we could read this part here. So Pacelli, who is the Pope, right, during Nazi Germany, Pacelli, he is the nuncio to Bavaria beginning in 1917, the bitter end of World War I, right? Now, note, Bavaria is also an extremely pro-Nazi area during World War II, during the rise of World War II. There's particularly a lot of Nazis in Bavaria. And this guy, he's sent there in 1917 as a representative of the Holy See. So he's been in Germany for an extremely long time. He knows German culture. He has a tight-knit relationship with the new rising Nazis, the Third Reich, right? So this Pope understands that the Nazi Party is not to be fucked with, right? But regardless, the Catholic Church is forced to follow this Lateran Treaty, right? Which is a treaty that was signed in 1929. These pacts between the Italians and the Church, because you got to remember, the Vatican may be in Italy, but Vatican City is its own independent sovereign nation, right? And this started in 1929 when the Catholics worked with Benito Mussolini, right? And they ended up settling this long-standing Roman question where the treaty recognized Vatican City as an independent state under the sovereignty of the Holy See, right? So the Vatican, despite being in Italy, despite not believing in fascism, despite having a lot of Jews living in Vatican City, in 1929, they essentially signed an agreement which said quite clearly that they would not take any sides politically, right? In terms of like any war or any political ideology. It says it right here. The agreements included a political treaty which created the State of the Vatican City and guaranteed full and independent sovereignty to the Holy See. The Pope was pledged to perpetual neutrality in international relations and to abstention from mediation in a controversy unless specifically requested by all parties. So what this means is, starting in 1929, the Pope was pledged to stay neutral in all international relations unless all parties specifically requested the Vatican to stand up and give their piece, right? So because of this, the new Pope, Pope Pius XII, starting in 1939, he refused to condemn the Nazis, right? And also refused to pick a side and say that the Catholic Church stands on the side of the Allies, right? So now here's the thing. There are two schools of thought for this, and historians still debate this, right? One school of thought is that Pope Pius II didn't condemn the Nazis, and he kind of operated in silence, trying to use the church to use financial aid to save Jews, and some of that is true, right? And one school of thought is that he did all of this to make sure the problem didn't get worse, to make sure that the Catholics in these areas in German Nazi-controlled Europe weren't also going to be rounded up and persecuted by the Nazis. The thing is, the Nazis already did. They persecuted the Catholic Church, specifically when the Catholic Church in Germany stood up and had a real big problem with the euthanasia program, right? There was a massive euthanasia program in Germany where they were euthanizing the mentally ill, the physically disabled, children, 15,000 children. So the Catholic Church stood up and said, hey, we can't fucking support this. These are God's children. Not only that, they are German, right? You are doing this to Germans. So during the beginning of World War II, the Vatican, it really couldn't pick a side. And this comes despite the fact that there's newfound evidence in 2023 that suggests that Pope Pius XII had detailed information from a trusted German Jesuit that up to 6,000 Jews and Poles were being gassed each day in German-occupied Poland. So the thing is, it begs the question. I don't know if you're Catholic, I don't know if you're a devout Christian, but I believe that you cannot know that information and choose not to speak up and still be a good Christian. Fuck your treaty. Fuck your 1929 treaty. If you are the Pope, you are apparently appointed by God to represent Christianity, and you are aware that, quote-unquote, God's children are being gassed in chambers, you have to speak up against this, right? Now, here's the thing. In Vatican City, 80% of the Jews living in Vatican City survived the Holocaust, okay? There are stories of, the Catholic Church spending money to secretly aid and abet Jews that were hiding in Europe, right, trying to avoid Nazi persecution. And that's all fine and dandy. Excuse me, sorry for the burp. That's all fine and dandy. But what we end up finally seeing in what is it, 1930, sorry, in 1942, I believe. Let's see. What we end up, yes, finally in 1942, Pope Pius here, the 12th, he kind of gathers his balls and kind of calls out the Nazi party without using them by name, right? And we have this here. Let's see. Yeah, see, this entire declaration that he made in 1942, which I believe is a Christmas declaration, he condemns the murders of thousands, right? Thousands who, without any fault of their own, sometimes only by the reason of their nationality or race, are marked down for death or gradual extinction, right? This is clearly poking at the Nazis, but he didn't have the balls to actually call them out by name because that would still be a violation of the treaty that they had signed, right? But things, you know, they do end up changing a little bit. We get this Mitbrennender Sorge, which is another, this is from Pope Pius XI, the Pope before the guy that we're talking about, where he does call for, like, the unity of humanity, and saying that without calling out the Nazis by name, or without calling out the fascist Italians by name, he's saying that this whole idea of, like, natural superiority because of, like, nationality or ethnic or your ethnicity, they're trying to establish and tell the Christians across the world that that is not God's message, which it absolutely wasn't, right? So here's the thing, though. At the same time, there were Catholics in the Vatican and throughout the Catholic Church across the world who were working with the Nazis. And there's concrete evidence of this. We've got, like, Alois Hudal, right? After World War II, Alois Hudal helped establish the Rat Lines, which allowed prominent Nazi German and other European former Axis officers and political leaders, among them accused war criminals, to escape Allied trials and denazification, right? Now, Alois Hudal, also known as Luigi Hudal, he was a bishop in the Catholic Church, okay? Nazi sympathizer based in Rome, right? For 30 years, he was head of the Austrian-German congregation of Santa Maria dell'Anima in Rome, and until 1937, an influential representative of the Catholic Church in Austria. Now, this guy, we know for a fact that he helped smuggle out hundreds of Nazis out of Europe using the Rat Lines, which were, you know, like these underground tunnel systems that would all go through Switzerland, I believe, right? And also, we have famous lawsuits, right? This lawsuit came in 1999 of people who it was an unsuccessful class action lawsuit by Holocaust survivors against the Vatican Bank for allegedly stealing their gold, right? Stealing their gold and keeping it down below, right? So in the Vatican vault, and the thing is, the only reason why they ended up losing this case was because, where is it here? The only reason why this case was dismissed, there it is because of sovereign immunity, right? Sovereign immunity is a legal doctrine whereby a sovereign or state cannot commit a legal wrong. So this means that like Vatican City, they could not sue the Vatican because of this bullshit law that says you just simply can't, they're not capable of committing a legal wrong because they are a sovereign state. It's not possible. You can't sue them for a civil suit. And what they were suing for was the fact that the Vatican allegedly was storing Nazi gold in the Vatican vault, which was stolen directly from the Jews, right? So things start to change. How do we move into the modern era? Things start to change in the post-World War II era. We get this, which is it's also known as the Vatican II, right? It's the Second Council of the Vatican, commonly known as Second Vatican Council, right? And essentially, this happened between 1962 and 1965, and it quite literally was just an example of Pope John the 23rd saying that the church needed updating. Literally, it was like a patch note. It was like the dev dropped a patch note for the Catholic Church. And it was because they saw how dangerous it is if you don't pick a side when things start to move into Holocaust territory, right? And suddenly we start to see this massive change within the Vatican, within Catholicism, and they start to focus more on this idea of unity, right? We even see this. It's called the Nostra Aetate, right? Or the Declaration on the Relation of the Church with Non-Christian Religions, right? And this is written in 1965. You can see this image here. We've got the Torah and the Bible, right? It's really just a document that is trying to help Christians across the world understand that there is no superiority, and that there is, a little bit of truth from every religion, and that we need to work together, that human beings are all born equal. It's not like Christians are superior to Jews or Christians are superior to Muslims. That's not how it works. And this is when we start to see this modern shift into a more understanding and a more unifying religion, right? Specifically, we got it in the Passamentaris, right, which is signed by the same Pope, Pope John the 23rd, on establishing universal peace and truth, justice, charity, and liberty. Now, this is an incredibly long document, but you see that it's focused on things like order in the universe, order in human beings. These are just Catholic ways of saying, like, fucking human rights. Order between men, that's essentially just saying equality, right? Rights, they're right here. Rights pertaining to moral and cultural values. People have the right to practice their own religion, all of this stuff. You start to see this modern, more accepting version of Christianity. Now, what I really was excited to show you, and I'd like to show you, was what Pope Francis was doing every single day since October 7th, since Hamas attacked Israel. He understood that Israel was, committing a genocide on the Palestinian people in Gaza. So he was calling the Catholic parish in Gaza every single day. And there is footage of his final call before he died. And I want you to watch it, okay?
Yusuf.
Buonasera Santo Padre.
Buonasera, come stai?
Sto bene, grazie a Dio. Mi scusa, è stato con il Santa Messa.
Ah, con la messa. E dimmi,
Sì.
cosa avete mangiato oggi?
Del pollo, le ali. El resto de polli.
El resto del pollo, la salita, ¿qué tal, Santo Padre? Lo que quedó del pollo de ayer.
Quasi tutti il compound qua ha mangiato pollo.
Casi
Pollo.
todos los refugiados acá comieron pollo ayer.
Ieri hanno mangiato pollo.
Anche il doctor Atallah.
Y también el doctor.
come va?
كلت فراخ النهارده يا دكتور؟ كلت قاعد فراخ النهارده.
الحمد لله.
Salam alaikum.
You hear that?
سلام عليكم.
Did you hear that? You just heard the Pope say Salam Alaikum. Do you understand that would get him excommunicated back in the day? Literally, that would get him excommunicated, probably imprisoned, okay? That is peace, that is unity, that is love, right? Compared to during World War II, the Vatican refusing to even condemn the Nazis out of fear of persecution.
حبيبنا ese nostro amato Papa.
Appreciate your
Acá venía a saludarlo.
Why are the subtitles dog shit? They don't have any closed captions.
بص
ايوه بص البابا ايوه.
Oh, it's a baby.
بابا
All right, so we don't need to watch the entirety of this, but you see my point is that this man was like a very humanitarian person, and what we're going to close this out with is with a quick article that covers his final call, right? One final call. Pope Francis's last blessing echoes in Gaza. You go fuck yourself. Gaza City, Pope o'clock. That's what Gaza residents sheltering in the besieged Catholic parish called the time, usually 8 p.m. local time, 7 p.m. in Rome, when Pope Francis would video call Father Gabriel Romanelli, the pastor of the Holy Family Church in Gaza. When he called, everyone would gather near the screen and say hello in Italian, in Arabic, and English, said Romanelli, one of Gaza's last remaining priests. In a place where killing seems omnipresent, the all-too-ordinary death of Pope Francis, who died on Monday at the age of 88, may have passed with little more than a moment's thought for some. But for the church officials and families at the Holy Family Church, the Pope was not a distant religious figure in a faraway country, but a daily presence. He truly became a member of the congregation, Romanelli said. Francis's phone calls, which began almost as soon as the war between Hamas and Israel kicked off some 18 months ago, became a touchstone, a moment of solace in a time of relentless bleakness. Yet, through these phone calls, the Pope came to understand the suffering of Gaza residents, Christians and Muslims alike, said George Anton, head of Emergency Response Committee for the Catholic Church in Gaza. He listened, really listened. He was asking, "What did you eat today? Did you eat anything?" And it wasn't a casual question. He came to know Gaza, not from news reports, but from our voices, our hearts, he said. As Palestinian Christians, we often feel forgotten, but in those moments, we weren't. The calls were only one manifestation of Francis's concern for people in the Holy Land on both sides. In his speeches, he often beseeched the warring parties to forge a ceasefire and end the suffering. He was outspoken in his criticism of Israel for its blockade of Gaza, including its most recent siege since March 2nd, which has stopped all humanitarian assistance into the enclave, according to aid groups. To the very end, he called for peace. I think the people of Gaza and its Christian community in particular, where the terrible conflict continues to cause death and destruction and to create a dramatic and deplorable humanitarian situation, Francis said in his Easter message, I appeal to the warring parties, call a ceasefire, release the hostages, and come to the aid of a starving people that aspires to a future of peace. What a stark difference from Pope Pius XII, who refused to even condemn the Nazis after finding out about thousands of people being gassed in chambers. A dynamic shift. Listen, I know this was fast-paced, a little bit rough on the edges, but that's what I'm here for. I'm here to give it to you the way that you want to be consuming knowledge. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Rabbit Hole. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And I'll catch you on Monday with the next episode of Valenti VOD. Have a good one.